Silver Creek, Wyoming, late winter. The snow had ceased its descent hours earlier, but its remnants cloaked the town like a whispered memory. White drifts piled on barn roofs, along split-rail fences, and thick over the small graveyard tucked beyond the town's edge. The sky hung heavy with gray, neither promising storm nor offering calm, just a restless quiet suspended in the chill. Eli Carson trudged along the frost-crusted trail winding above the cemetery. He wore a weathered brown duster, buttoned high against the cold, and a faded black Stetson pulled low over his brow. Wisps of dark hair, streaked with silver, curled at his collar. His beard, rough and uneven, bore the look of a man too busy with cattle to bother with a mirror. His rugged face carried lines etched by years of hard sun, harder winters, and the quiet weight of a life rebuilt from ashes. He moved with a rancher's steady gait, deliberate but watchful, a man who knew the land's dangers as well as its promises. At his side padded Rune, his loyal German shepherd, the one companion who'd stayed through every storm. Rune, 9 years old, bore a thick sable coat and a jagged scar across his right shoulder, earned from a tangle with barbed wire during a cattle drive. His ears stood sharp, his steps measured, trained to guard and protect. Unlike other dogs, Rune didn't bound or bark. He observed always. Eli hadn't meant to come this way. He'd been back in Silver Creek only a week, fresh from selling off the last of his herd in Cheyenne. This town was where he'd been raised, where he'd hoped to stitch together fragments of a life left frayed by years of loss. He hadn't expected the funeral. It was a sparse affair. 7 mourners huddled around a single coffin at the cemetery's far end, near a cluster of frost-draped pines. A gray tarp sagged over them, flapping in the biting wind. White lilies trembled in gloved hands. A boy no older than 10, in a coat too heavy for his slight frame, stood by the coffin, his head bowed, hands clasped tight. Rune froze. Eli felt the leash pull taut. The dog's ears flicked, his gaze locked on the gathering, his breath quickening into short, sharp puffs. Then came the growl, low, guttural, not a threat but a signal. Something was wrong. "What's got you, boy?" Eli murmured, crouching beside Rune. His eyes followed the dog's stare to the coffin, sealed and dusted with snow. The mourners didn't notice, their heads bent in grief. But Rune's growl deepened, and before Eli could tighten the leash, the dog lunged forward, charging toward the funeral. The mourners startled as Rune barreled through the snow, his paws kicking up powder. Eli called after him, his voice sharp but low, not wanting to disturb the solemnity. Rune stopped at the coffin, sniffing furiously, his tail rigid. He pawed at the wood, a soft whine escaping his throat. The boy looked up, wide-eyed, as the others whispered in confusion. "Sir, control your dog," an older man in a black coat snapped, stepping forward. But Eli's focus was on Rune. The dog never acted without reason. In the fields, Rune had sensed coyotes before Eli heard their howls, found lost calves in ravines no one else could spot. This was different, though. This was urgent. Eli reached the coffin, his hand on Rune's collar. "Easy, boy." He glanced at the mourners, then at the coffin. The nameplate read Clara Hayes. The date of death was 3 days ago. Eli didn't know her, but something about the name tugged at him, like a half-remembered dream. Rune whined again, louder, and pressed his nose to the coffin's edge. Then it happened. A faint tremor, barely perceptible, like a heartbeat in the wood. The mourners froze. The boy gasped, stepping back. Eli's hand tightened on Rune's collar as he stared at the coffin. It trembled again, stronger this time, a dull thud from within. "She's gone," the older man said, his voice unsteady. "Doctor said so. Heart failure. It's done." But Rune's eyes never left the coffin, and Eli's gut twisted. He'd seen too much in his years on the range. Calves born still but brought back with a nudge, men lost to blizzards found breathing under snow. Life didn't always follow what doctors declared. "Who wanted her buried so fast?" Eli asked, his voice low, eyes scanning the group. The mourners exchanged glances, but none answered. The boy's eyes darted to a woman in a gray shawl, her face pale, her hands clutching a lily so tightly it crumpled. Rune pawed at the coffin again, and another thud echoed, louder, desperate. Eli's heart pounded. He didn't know Clara Hayes, but he knew Rune, and Rune never forgot a soul worth saving. Rune didn't respond, of course. He just surged forward. The leash jerked Eli off balance, pulling him toward the burial site. His boots crunched through the icy crust of snow, his pulse hammering in his ears. Something about this felt wrong, like a storm brewing in a clear sky. He reached to rein Rune in, but then he saw it, the photograph propped beside the coffin. He stopped cold. Clara. The world tilted. Her name lodged in his chest like a splinter. Her chestnut hair, her sharp cheekbones, the eyes that had steadied him through sleepless nights after the bank foreclosed on his first ranch. That smile, the one that had cut through his darkest days. And below the frame, a nameplate. Clara and Carson, beloved wife and mother. His wife, dead. Couldn't be. Eli's mind was a fog. No memory of a call, a letter, nothing to explain this. Just a void where her laughter used to live. He stumbled forward, his throat closing. No, this isn't right. The boy by the coffin looked up. Curly black hair, cheeks red from the cold, a blue scarf trailing from his oversized coat. He had Clara's eyes. "Pa!" he whispered. Eli's knees buckled. "Toby!" he rasped, recognizing his son, now 7. Toby's arms wrapped around him, his small body shaking with sobs. Eli held him tight, but his gaze stayed on the coffin. "Pa!" Toby mumbled into his coat. "Ma was talking to me last night. Said don't let em put her in the ground." Eli froze. Then it came, a faint thud from the coffin. Rune growled, louder now, circling the wooden box, his body taut as a bowstring. Another thud. Eli's heart lurched. "Wait! Stop!" he shouted. A man in a gray suit, mid-motion to lower the coffin, froze. A woman in her late 50s, sharp-featured with graying blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, stepped forward, her eyes cold. Margaret Lyle, Clara's aunt, always composed, always calculating. "What are you doing, Eli?" she demanded, her voice like a whip. Eli didn't answer. His hands were already on the coffin's latches, fumbling with the cold metal. "Eli, she's gone. Don't tarnish her memory," Margaret said, her tone icy. Rune barked, sharp, urgent. The first latch gave way. Eli's breath caught as he pried open the second. He lifted the lid. Inside, Clara lay in a pale blue dress, her skin ghostly but not lifeless. A faint sheen of sweat glistened on her brow. Her lips quivered. Her chest rose, barely, with a shallow breath. The mourners gasped. Silence choked the air. Then a cry broke through. Betsy, Clara's former housekeeper, a stout woman with gray curls, sobbed from the back. "She's alive! Lord, she's breathin'!" Chaos erupted. Margaret stumbled back, her face drained of color. One mourner clutched his chest, swaying. Eli dropped to his knees beside the coffin, his calloused hands cradling Clara's face. "Clara, I'm here. I've got you." Rune pressed his nose to the coffin's edge, eyes fixed on Clara, guarding her as always. "Clara," Eli whispered, "you ain't leaving me. Not now." The ambulance tore through Silver Creek's quiet streets, its sirens slicing through the winter hush. Snow had started falling again, light flakes dusting the tire tracks behind. Inside, Eli hunched over Clara, one hand gripping the stretcher's rail, the other wrapped around her cold fingers, searching for the warmth he knew was there. Toby sat wedged between the EMTs, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes locked on his mother's face. Rune, paws caked with mud, stood rigid at the ambulance's rear, ears twitching with every faint breath Clara took. No one dared tell him to move. At the hospital's ER bay, medics swarmed. Dr. Sarah Klein, a wiry woman in her mid-40s with short-cropped brown hair and piercing green eyes, led the charge. Her years in rural clinics had honed her for moments like this. Calm, decisive, no hesitation. Status? She barked, striding beside the stretcher. Pulse weak but steady. Respiration shallow. Signs of hypothermia. She was declared dead, the EMT said, pausing, but found alive in the coffin. Klein's jaw tightened, but she nodded. No assumptions. Trauma Bay 1, vitals every minute, full workup. Get me her medical records, if they exist. As Clara was wheeled through the double doors, Eli stood rooted, watching her vanish. A nurse touched his arm. Family waiting rooms down the hall. I'm her husband, Eli said, his voice rough, like gravel underfoot. Toby clung to his side, his small hand fisted in Eli's duster. The nurse gave a quiet nod. Then come inside. Eli sank into a chair in the waiting room, the beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights closing in. A wilted fern sat in the corner. Rune settled by the door, half in, half out, his body tense, ready. Minutes later, Margaret entered, her coat pristine, her expression a mask of barely held control. Eli, she said, her voice low, we need to talk. Margaret's voice cut like a blade, though her eyes flickered with unease. Eli, this isn't the place for a scene. Eli didn't meet her gaze. You didn't tell me. Not a word. There was nothing to tell, Margaret said, her tone clipped. She was gone. The doctor confirmed it. You were out on the range, no phone, no address. Even the bank couldn't track you down. He turned to her now, his eyes harder than the frozen ground outside. You knew I was alive. Margaret's composure wavered. I had custody of Toby while you were gone. I made decisions. Toby tugged at Eli's sleeve, his voice small but clear. Ma said not to let him take her. Said she wasn't finished. Margaret's face paled. Before she could speak, Dr. Klein entered, peeling off her gloves. She's stable, intubated, hypothermic, dehydrated. We found sedatives in her system. Labs are pending. Can I see her? Eli asked. Klein nodded. Briefly. She's unconscious. Eli looked at Toby. Stay with Rune. I want to go, Toby whispered. Eli paused, then nodded. In the ICU, Clara lay under a thin blanket, wires snaking from her arms. Her lips were pale, her brow damp, but her chest moved with steady breaths. Eli brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'm here, Clara. I found you. Toby stood on tiptoe, whispering, Ma, you ain't gone. I knew it. Through the ICU's glass window, Rune sat vigilant, guarding the quiet. A nurse eventually ushered them out. That evening, Eli sat in the hallway outside the ICU, elbows on knees, staring at the linoleum. Margaret had left. Toby slept in a chair, Rune beside him, still as stone. Dr. Klein approached, holding a tablet. Her file's wrong, she said, sitting beside Eli. No ER notes, just one line. Deceased on arrival. Signed by Dr. Harrow. Eli's jaw clenched. Harrow. He patched me up 2 years back after a fall. Said I'd never ride again. He didn't follow protocol, Klein said. 3 confirmations, 10-minute intervals. It's not here. Eli's fists tightened. He tried to bury her alive. Klein didn't reply, but her silence spoke volumes. Across the room, Toby stirred. Pa, he mumbled. Rune's watching the door. Like he's waiting. Eli glanced at Rune. The dog's eyes were fixed on the hallway, ears alert. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Morning broke without sun. A thick fog rolled in from the Wyoming hills, wrapping Silver Creek's hospital in a ghostly veil. Frost clung to the windows of St. Agnes Medical Center, smudging the view of the quiet town. In the ICU, Clara's breathing was steadier, machines humming softly. Her fingers twitched faintly, a sign she was clawing her way back. Toby sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching with a stubby pencil someone had left. His focus mirrored Clara's when she used to tally the ranch's books. Rune stayed by the door, ears flicking at every sound in the hall. Dr. Klein returned, holding a printout and a thermos. Her brown hair was tucked into a messy bun, her eyes tired but sharp. "I checked the chart again," she said, handing Eli the paper. "One pulse check, 38 seconds. No second opinion, no intervals, nothing." "Who signed it?" Eli asked. "Harrow." "There's more," Klein said, voice low. The room listed for her evaluation was 308. Eli's head snapped up. "That's upstairs, ain't it?" Klein nodded. "It's been closed since last year's budget cuts. Used to be for psych holds and overflow. No patients go there now." Eli stood looking at Rune. "Let's go." The stairwell to the third floor was dim, the air heavy with dust. The elevator was locked for that level, but Eli wasn't waiting for keys. The stairs creaked under his boots, Rune padding beside him, nose twitching as they passed the second floor. The third floor was a ghost town. No hum of machines, no voices, just silence. Rune's ears perked, and he froze, staring down the hall. Eli followed his gaze to a door marked 308. Its handle rusted, a faint light flickering under the frame. Something was wrong. He took a step forward, Rune's low growl echoing in the stillness. The hallway reeked of bleach and rot, a mix that set Eli's nerves on edge. Most doors bore faded yellow tape marked closed for maintenance, but room 308 had no sign, just a tarnished brass number half-coated in dust. Rune halted, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Eli's hand closed around the doorknob, turned without resistance. Unlocked. Inside, room 308 was a relic. A bare hospital bed sat in the center, a single wrinkled sheet draped across it. A rusted four-stand tilted against the wall, and a rolling tray gathered dust in the corner. The air was frigid, heavy with stagnation. No windows, just a flickering bulb overhead and a silence that pressed against the ears. Rune entered first, nose to the floor, then froze, clawing at a patch of linoleum. 3 faint scratches marred the surface, partially cleaned, the air sharp with the chemical tang of sedatives. Eli knelt, fingers tracing the marks. A cold dread settled in his gut. They brought her here. A faint rustle came from the bed. Eli stood, noticing a small tag tucked under the mattress edge. He pulled it free. Handwritten, it read L. Harrow. The patient name was scratched out in black ink, but still legible. Clara Carson. Before he could process it, the door creaked. Eli spun, instincts flaring. A wiry man in a janitor's uniform stood in the doorway, late 50s, stooped, with sallow skin and thinning gray hair under a frayed cap. He gripped a mop, but his eyes flicked nervously. "You ain't supposed to be here," the man said, his voice gravelly detached. "Looking for someone," Eli replied. "A woman brought here last week. Brown hair, hospital gown." The man shrugged. "Floor's been empty for months. Nothing here." Eli's gaze hardened. "Did you see her?" The man hesitated, then turned to leave. "Don't recall faces." Rune lunged forward with a sharp bark, not aggressive but insistent. The janitor froze. "Your name?" Eli asked. "Cal." "You work every floor?" Cal didn't answer. Then, quietly, "They don't use this place for patients no more. But sometimes, folks pass through." He shuffled off before Eli could press further. Back in the ICU, Eli sat by Clara's side. Her eyes were shut, but she stirred faintly, muttering fragments. He leaned close. "Clara, I found the room. They never meant for you to be declared dead. Someone took you there first." Her lips twitched. "Couldn't move," she whispered. "Gloves, cold breath. Something in my arm. Legs went numb." Eli's pulse surged. "Who, Clara?" Her brow creased. "White coat. No name." Then she slipped back into silence. Rune stood at the doorway, ears alert, watching the hall. Eli knew the man with no name wasn't done. The afternoon sky over Silver Creek was a flat iron gray, casting long shadows through the windows of the Carson Ranch house. Betsy Turner stood on a stool in Clara's old office, reaching into a high cupboard. At 62, Betsy was stocky, with gray curls escaping a loose bun and hands worn from years of tending the Carson home. Her eyes, though, were keen, missing nothing. She'd been with Clara since Toby was born, more kin than hired help. She pulled down a dusty leather pouch tied with twine. Inside was a scratched silver USB drive, unlabeled. Her lips pursed. Hidden for a reason. She pocketed it and headed to St. Agnes. In a quiet corner near the hospital's security office, Betsy met Eli. He sat, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights, as she slid the USB across the table. Found this in Clara's office, behind her ledgers. She wanted it found. Eli nodded and called Dr. Klein. They huddled around her laptop, Rune rigid at Eli's side. Toby was outside, sketching with a nurse. The video flickered to life, timestamped 1:47 a.m. It showed a hospital hallway, the camera fixed on room 308. A man entered the frame, thin, mid-40s, in an unmarked lab coat. No ID. He carried a tray of vials and syringes, moving with deliberate steps. His skin was pale, his dark hair slicked back, his face expressionless. He swiped a keycard and entered the room. A minute later he emerged, tray gone. Klein's eyes narrowed. That's Leonard Harrow. Eli's jaw tightened. The name on the tag. Klein nodded. He was a tech here, fired last year for stealing sedatives. Case was hushed up. On the screen, the hallway stayed empty until another figure appeared. Dr. Harrow, late 50s, broad-shouldered, with thinning gray hair. He stared into the camera, then flipped a switch beside the door, plunging the corridor into darkness. The screen went dark. Rune sprang up, barking sharply at the sudden blackout. Eli steadied him with a firm hand on his collar. He knows, Betsy whispered. He was outside that door. He remembers. Eli sat back, the weight of the silence pressing against the room. That evening, he found Toby in the family waiting room, curled up with a stack of papers and a few worn pencils. The boy was sketching, his brow furrowed in focus. What you drawin', son? Eli asked, kneeling beside him. Toby turned the paper. It showed a coffin with a raven perched on top, wings half spread, eyes like black beads. Beside it stood a tall, faceless figure. A blank oval for a head, no eyes, no mouth. Who's that? Eli asked, voice soft. Toby didn't look up. He watches Ma at night. He don't blink. Eli's stomach churned. You seen him before? Toby nodded. He was by her bed when she couldn't wake up. Rune settled beside them, ears sharp. Eli handed Toby another sheet. Can you draw where you saw him? Toby nodded, his pencil already moving. That night, with Toby asleep by Clara's bedside, Eli stood with Betsy and Dr. Klein outside the ICU, replaying the video in silence. Clara's vitals had improved, but she remained unconscious, her fingers twitching more often, her face tensing in restless sleep. I want to know who let that man in, Eli said. Harrow was fired. Who gave him access, and why'd Harrow cover it up? Klein crossed her arms, her expression tight. Someone overrode the system. I can pull access logs, but it'll take time. Someone wanted this buried, Eli muttered. Not just buried, erased. They stood in silence until Clara's monitor beeped louder. Her arm shifted, eyes fluttering. Eli rushed to her side, taking her hand. Clara, I'm here. Her eyes cracked open, clouded but focused on him. He came at night, she whispered, barely audible. Tried to scream. Couldn't. I know, Eli said, voice breaking. We got proof. From the corner, Toby stirred. Is Ma okay? Clara's hand reached weakly toward him. In the hallway, Rune's ears flicked upward, his body tensing as he stared into the shadows above the fluorescent lights, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Morning came cold and still, a thin glaze of ice coating Silver Creek's sidewalks and hospital windows. The world outside St. Agnes seemed frozen in place. Eli stood by the ICU hallway window, clutching a manila envelope marked confidential. Insurance records. Dr. Klein had called him an hour earlier, her voice clipped. You need to see this. Someone fast-tracked your wife's death certificate through the rancher's cooperative insurance. Eli opened the envelope, dread sinking into his bones. The top sheet was standard insurance jargon, but one clause stopped him cold. If the legal spouse of a policyholder passes away prior to the policy's termination, a $500,000 benefit will be awarded to the designated interim guardian. At the bottom, in sharp print, interim guardian, Margaret Lyle. Eli's name was absent. The document was signed and timestamped 2 weeks before he'd returned to Silver Creek, while he was still grappling with debt and foreclosure notices at a distant cattle auction. Eli's jaw tightened, his breath slowing. Rune sat by the elevator, eyes locked forward, ears perked. Toby, down the hall with a nurse, was sketching again. Rune's sudden low growl pulled Eli's attention. The dog's nose lifted, sensing something Eli couldn't. Eli folded the document and tucked it into the envelope. He needed answers. He knocked once on the administrative office door and stepped inside without waiting. The room was stark, lined with filing cabinets and a polished desk. Margaret stood behind it, dressed in a crisp navy blazer, her graying blonde hair in a flawless bun. Her composure flickered when she saw Eli. "Eli," she said, her voice measured. "Is Clara? You tried to bury her before I got back." Eli cut in, voice flat. "You knew I was alive." Margaret's smile faltered. "Don't be dramatic." He dropped the envelope on her desk. "You signed as guardian. Filed this while I was still on the road. Never called me." She opened the envelope, her face unreadable as she scanned the papers. "I ensured Toby would be cared for," she said coolly. "You were unreachable, drowning in debt. It was practical." Eli leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And the $500,000? That practical too?" Margaret's lips parted, then closed. "I filed as a formality," she said, her voice steady but her hands betraying a slight tremor. "You're twisting this." Rune growled from the doorway, his eyes fixed on Margaret, and Eli knew the truth was far from buried. "You knew how slow ranch paperwork moves," Eli said, his voice low and steady. "I remember now. You visited me at the auction in Cheyenne. Smiled, asked if I was holding up. That was 2 days before you filed her death." Margaret's eyes widened briefly. "You were watching," Eli added, "waiting to see if I'd remember. When I didn't, you acted." She didn't deny it. Eli turned to leave. "I'm talking this to the county sheriff, the co-op board, and the insurance office. Let's see how practical your choices look in court." As he stepped out, Rune, waiting in the hall, pressed forward and growled at Margaret. His nose twitched, then his claws raked her leather satchel on the floor. 3 sharp, deliberate scratches. Margaret's gaze darted to the bag. Eli didn't look back. In the hospital staff lounge, Eli found Dr. Klein reviewing scans. "She's stabilizing faster," Klein said, looking up. "Said your name in her sleep last night." Eli let the relief settle briefly, then handed her the insurance file. Margaret forged guardianship to claim the payout if Clara died. Klein read, her brow furrowing. "This gives motive," Eli said. "Not just legal games, money." Klein nodded. "If she leaned on hospital staff or pushed for a quick call, it explains the single vitals check." "I need all her correspondence with Margaret during Clara's stay," Eli said. Klein exhaled. "I'll need internal approvals, but I'll get what I can." As Eli turned to leave, Toby appeared in the hallway with his nurse, clutching a drawing. "Pa!" he called, running up. Rune didn't like the papers Aunt Margaret gave the nurse. He scratched him. Eli knelt. "Scratched the papers?" Toby nodded. "They smelled funny, like that upstairs room." Eli's eyes sharpened. Cleaning room, chemicals, sedatives. The scent Rune knew. He looked at the dog, whose gaze was fixed, unyielding. It wasn't just memory, it was instinct. They weren't done digging. Snow dusted Silver Creek's police station parking lot, thin and fleeting. Inside, the interview room felt heavy, the air thick. Dr. Leonard Harrow sat at a metal table, his crisp white coat creased, glasses smudged, gray hair slick with sweat. He looked diminished, guilt carving years into his face. Detective Clara Holt leaned forward, a solid woman in her late 40s with close-cropped auburn hair and piercing gray eyes. Her navy suit was sharp, her demeanor calm but unyielding, honed by years of sifting through lies. She slid a recorder across the table and clicked it on. "Dr. Harrow," she said, "we have footage of you entering room 308 after hours. Hospital records show 1 pulse check on Clara Carson. Protocol demands 3. Explain." Harrow rubbed his temples. "I didn't kill her," he muttered. "I didn't want this." "You signed the death certificate," Holt said, unflinching. He hesitated, hands shaking. "She was in a coma. Margaret said she had guardianship, said Eli wasn't coming back. Said it was better to move on fast." "You took her word?" Holt pressed. "No," Harrow said, voice cracking, eyes darting to the door. "She threatened me." 2 hours later, an unmarked sheriff's SUV rolled to a stop outside a dilapidated cabin deep in the pines north of Silver Creek. The structure sagged, its porch half collapsed, a single shutter dangling from a rusted hinge. Eli stepped out, duster pulled tight against the wind. Rune leapt down, nose high, ears alert. Inside, Leonard Harrow sat hunched in a corner, gaunt and pale, his dark hair matted. His old tech uniform was tattered, his bloodshot eyes flickering to Eli and Rune. "I didn't kill nobody," he whispered, rocking slightly. "Just did what I was told." Rune snarled, teeth bared, lunging a step before Eli gripped his harness. Harrow flinched. "Who told you?" Eli asked, voice steady. Harrow's lips quivered. "She said it was protocol. Said once a patient's marked, no turning back." "Marked?" Eli pressed. Harrow pointed to his arm. "She made me draw an X. Every patient with an X was done. I brought the tray, same meds every time. Clara." She was awake, looking at me. "I knew it was wrong, but I did it." He mumbled. "Margaret said she'd ruin me if I didn't. Said she'd make it all vanish, like she made you vanish." Eli's fists clenched. Rune growled again, claws scraping the floor near Harrow's feet. Then he whined, a sharp, urgent sound Eli had heard only twice. Once when Rune found a lost calf in a storm, and once when he sniffed out a ranch hand trapped under a collapsed fence, presumed dead. "Where'd you get the sedative?" Eli asked, voice low. Harrow blinked, his eyes darting to a small, locked box in the corner of the cabin, barely visible in the dim light. "Hospital storage," Harrow whispered, his voice brittle. "Margaret gave me the code. Said she used it all the time. Same vial every time." Back at St. Agnes, Clara stirred under the crisp hospital sheets. Her fingers twitched, eyelids fluttering open. Her skin, though pale, held a faint warmth. Eli sat beside her, one calloused hand cradling hers. Toby sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching in a worn notebook, his face tight with focus. Rune lay by the door, one eye open, ever watchful. "Eli," Clara's voice rasped, faint as a breeze. He leaned in, heart racing. "I'm here." Her head turned slowly, lips cracked. "I saw him. His eyes. I couldn't move." "Leonard Harrow," Eli said. "We found him." "No," she murmured, eyes darkening. "Not him. He was shaken. Someone else. I heard Margaret on the phone. Finish it before Eli's back." Her grip tightened. "They were gonna bury me alive." Eli swallowed hard. "You're safe now, Clara. We ain't done yet." Detective Holt knocked softly and stepped in, her expression stern but steady. "Harrow confessed," she said, nodding to Eli. "We've got enough to charge Margaret with conspiracy, coercion, and attempted manslaughter. Her financials show she tried moving the insurance payout offshore last night." Eli exhaled slowly. Holt turned to Clara. "We'll need your statement when you're ready. No rush." Clara nodded weakly. "I'll do it. Just need a little time." Holt offered a small smile. "We've got time." As she left, Eli leaned closer to Clara. "You came back to us." Clara's lips curved faintly, the room brighter for it. Rune rose, patting over to rest a paw on her blanket, as if to say, "I knew you weren't gone." The next day, Silver Creek was shrouded in thick fog, curling low over the hills, muffling the world. The Carson Ranch house, weathered and gray, blended into the misty sky. Snow on the roof was unbroken, save for large paw prints appearing after dusk. Rune had taken to the roof since Margaret filed for emergency custody of Toby. Eli stood in the kitchen, the legal notice trembling in his hands. "She's claimin' I'm unfit," he growled. "Says I'm seein' things, that Toby ain't safe with us." Clara, wrapped in a quilt, sat at the table, her cheeks regaining color. Her chestnut hair, pinned with Toby's clumsy barrettes, framed her still-haunted eyes. "She's trying to erase me again," she whispered. "Now she's after our boy." Eli knelt beside her, his hand finding hers. "She won't win, Clara. Not this time." Toby shuffled in, wearing patched pajamas, clutching a tattered stuffed horse. He held a drawing behind his back. "Pa," he said softly, "can I show you something?" Eli nodded. Toby revealed a paper thick with crayon strokes. A slanted rooftop with a black raven perched atop, its eyes glowing red. Below, 3 shadowed figures stood close. Rune, drawn large in brown and gold, glared at the bird, ears sharp. "What's this, son?" Eli asked, kneeling. Toby's voice was barely a whisper. "He's watching us from up there. Rune don't sleep. He knows." "Knows what?" Toby shook his head. "He won't let em take me." That night, Eli climbed the rickety ladder to the roof. The shingles creaked under his boots. Rune sat at the edge, facing the pine-thick horizon, tail curled tight, breath steaming. Eli crouched beside him. "You see something, don't you, boy?" Rune's eyes stayed fixed on the tree-lean, unblinking. The next morning, Eli drove to the county courthouse. The judge's clerk, a wiry woman named Ms. Ellis with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense stare, handed him the custody motion. "Filed yesterday," she said. "Includes psych reports on Clara, dated during her sedation. Over a year old." "That's illegal," Eli said, voice low. "She was drugged without consent." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "Bring that evidence to court. Hearings in 2 days." As Eli left, he brushed past a man in a faded brown coat entering the building. Thin, balding, with a slight limp, the man didn't look up. Something about him felt wrong. Eli memorized his face. That evening, Clara sat on their bed, sifting through a box of old papers. Her fingers stopped on an envelope with a ranch co-op seal, edges yellowed. She opened it, reading slowly. Her face paled. Clara held up the yellowed envelope, her voice trembling. "This came when you were hurt, Eli. Said you didn't make it through the surgery, that you were buried out of state." Eli's brow furrowed. "I never signed any death notice. That ain't how the co-op works." "I know," Clara said, tears brimming. "I was 6 months pregnant with Toby. Margaret stayed with me, told me to grieve, to let go. I believed her. I didn't know you were alive." Eli sat beside her, stunned. "She sent you a fake letter." Clara nodded. "Then she pushed me into that hospital after Toby was born. Said I wasn't fit to care for him. I think she just wanted me gone." Rune stood at the doorway, tail low, a quiet growl rumbling. Toby appeared behind him, eyes wide. "There's a man in the yard," he whispered. Eli grabbed his jacket and stepped onto the porch, but the yard was empty. Only fresh footprints in the snow, trailing from the pines to the house and back. That night, Eli sat in the living room, shotgun propped by the hearth. Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Toby slept curled against Rune, his small hand buried in the dog's fur. Outside, a pair of red eyes blinked once in the darkness, then vanished into the trees. Silver Creek's Winter Glow Festival lit up the town, an old tradition that warmed the coldest nights. Snow crunched under boots, and shop windows gleamed with fairy lights and wreaths. Laughter and the scent of mulled wine drifted through the square. For the first time in years, peace settled over Eli's shoulders. He stood with Clara and Toby, Rune alert at his side. Eli's weathered face, scar over his left brow, deep hazel eyes, softened in the lantern glow. His hands, rough from years on the range, moved with a rancher's caution, but his gaze held a hard-won calm. Clara wore a long gray coat, her chestnut hair falling in soft waves. Her cheeks had regained color, her eyes sharp but still wary. She held Toby's mittened hand tightly. Toby, in a green jacket with a patched elbow, clutched a drawing. 3 figures under a starry sky, Rune beside them, and a glowing lantern above. In the distance, a faint black bird watched. "Is this our wish, son?" Clara asked. Toby nodded. "It's us and Rune." Eli took the lantern, a delicate paper orb, and knelt. "Let's write it together." They scrawled. "Let no one be lost again. Let truth guide us, love keep us." Betsy stood nearby, chatting with a town elder, her plaid shawl tucked tight, gray curls peeking from her cap. She gave them a warm nod. Earlier, Sheriff Langston, a stocky man in his 50s with a graying beard and blunt demeanor, had held a press briefing. Investigation confirms medical falsification, coercion, and insurance fraud. Margaret Lyle manipulated hospital protocols with 2 accomplices, now in custody. Clara Carson survived due to her husband's and his dog's intervention. When asked if Margaret acted alone, Langston paused. This wasn't her first scheme. Margaret had been arrested the previous night, her tailored coat pristine as she was led away, chin high, blonde hair slightly askew. She said nothing, her silence sharp. Dr. Harrow took a plea deal to testify about the cover-up. Leonard Harrow, found in a derelict barn clutching a tattered journal, faced a swift trial. In the square, Toby tugged Eli's sleeve. "Can I let it go?" Eli smiled. Together on 3. The lantern rose, joining others in the sky. The crowd clapped, a soft cheer rippling through the chill. Rune sat on the square's stone steps, ears twitching at the crackle of lanterns and distant laughter. At 9, his sable coat gleamed, though gray flecked his muzzle. His scarred shoulder bore the mark of a hard life, but he stood proud. Eli knelt, hand on Rune's back. "You did good, boy. Never gave up on her." Clara joined them, her breath visible in the cold. "I still don't know how close it was. Almost buried alive." Eli stayed quiet, letting her speak. She watched the lanterns. "I can't forgive her. Don't know if I ever will. But I'm grateful. I'd have missed Toby growin', missed holding your hand." Eli squeezed her fingers. "You don't gotta forgive. Just be here." Rune's head snapped toward the square's edge, eyes locked on the treeline. Eli followed his gaze, nothing but a rustle in the pines. Then, on the gazebo roof, a black raven appeared, its feathers glinting like oil in the lantern light. Silent, watching, Clara saw it too. "That bird," she whispered. "In my dreams, in the hospital. Always there." Eli stood. "Just a bird." "No," Clara said softly. "It's something else." Toby, dozing on a bench, stirred in his sleep. Rune lay beside him, head near his feet. As the last lantern vanished into the sky, Eli draped his coat over his son and looked up. The past, though heavy, no longer bound them. Their light rose unbroken. Sometimes miracles come not with fanfare but in quiet moments. A child's drawing, a dog's loyalty, a mother's whispered strength. Eli and Clara's story wasn't just about unmasking lies. It was about holding fast when the world let go. A reminder that no deception, no grave injustice, can outlast truth and love. Perhaps you're standing at the edge of loss, clinging to buried hope. Where love breathes, where faith whispers, healing begins. Sometimes it's a rancher, a child, or a dog that carries the light. If the story moved you, share the word amen and your location below. Pass it to someone who believes in miracles. May light always find you.